This is history they never taught you. In 1896, the British Empire fought a war that lasted 38 minutes. It happened in Zanzibar, a small island off the coast of East Africa. On paper, it looks like a footnote, but if you zoom out just a little, it tells you exactly how power worked at the height of the European Empire. To understand why it ended so fast, you have to understand the world it sat inside. Zanzibar wasn't large, but it was positioned well. It sat along the East African coast near major Indian Ocean trade routes. For centuries, merchants passed through those waters carrying spice, textiles, ivory, and other goods between Africa, Arabia, and South Asia. The island grew wealthy from trade. Cloves were one of its primary exports. For a long time, it was also deeply tied to regional slave trade, which connected it to broader networks of influence and control. By the late 1800s, Europe was changing quickly. Industrialization had accelerated. Factories needed raw materials, expanding populations needed markets, naval technology had improved dramatically. Steam-powered ships, modern artillery made overseas expansion far and far more practical. Africa became one of the key focuses of competition. Historians call this period the Scramble of Africa. Between the 1880s and early 1900s, European powers moved rapidly to claim territory. Borders were drawn in conference rooms thousands of miles away from the land itself. Britain cared deeply about the trade routes, especially those connected to India. India was one of its most valuable colonies. Securing coastlines mattered, and Zanzibar sat directly inside that network. Zanzibar still had a sultan. Formally, it remained independent, but independence during the scramble for Africa often came with its limits. In 1890, Britain and Germany signed the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty. Germany recognized British influence over Zanzibar. In exchange, Britain made concessions elsewhere in Africa and Europe. This didn't instantly turn Zanzibar into a British colony, but it did make one thing clear. Britain would have final influence over its political direction. If a sultan died, Britain expected to approve the next leader. That agreement was designed to prevent instability and protect British interests. From Britain's perspective, it kept order. From Zanzibar's perspective, it reduced autonomy. On August 25th, 1896, Sultan Hamad bin Thuwani died unexpectedly. In monarchies, succession moves fast. Whoever controls the palace first often controls the narrative. Khalid bin Barkash acted immediately. He entered the palace complex and declared himself sultan. Supporters gathered around him. The move was public and decisive. British officials responded just as quickly. They informed Khalid that under agreements already in place, he needed British approval to take control. He didn't have that. The message was clear, it was to step down. A deadline was set for 9 a.m. on August 27th. That gave Khalid roughly 2 days. Instead of stepping aside, he prepared for resistance instead. Around 2,800 supporters gathered near the palace. Some carried rifles, a few artillery pieces were positioned toward the harbor. The Sultanate had a small armored vessel anchored offshore as well. Across the water sat British naval ships, trained crews, advanced naval guns capable of sustained bombardment. If you stood on the shoreline that morning, the imbalance would have been extremely obvious. As 9 a.m. approached, British ships adjusted their position and guns were pointed directly toward the palace. At 8:55, there was no sign of surrender, and at 9 a.m., the deadline passed. At approximately 9:02, British ships opened fire. Shells struck the palace complex, which was largely built from wood, and the structure caught fire very quickly. Smoke rose over the shoreline within minutes. Zanzibar's artillery returned fire, but it lacked range and precision. The small naval vessel attempted to engage British ships and was hit during the exchange. It sank shortly after. British ships maintained controlled bombardment for roughly half an hour. By 9:40, the palace was destroyed. Khalid fled the compound and sought refuge in the German consulate. Shortly after that, the British stopped fighting. The war lasted 38 minutes. Estimates suggest that around 500 Zanzibaris were killed or wounded during the bombardment. Britain reported only one injured sailor. Soon after the fighting ended, Britain installed a sultan it approved. Khalid remained under German protection for a period before eventually leaving Zanzibar. In 1897, Zanzibar formally became a British protectorate. The succession crisis ended, imperial control strengthened. The length of the war often gets a lot of attention. 38 minutes sounds unreal, but the duration reflects something larger. By the late 19th century, industrial technology had transformed naval warfare. Steam propulsion, steel construction, and modern artillery allowed European fleets to project force with efficiency and precision. Coastal states with limited defenses faced overwhelming disadvantage against modern warships. Once the deadline passed and the first shots were fired, the outcome wasn't uncertain. The difference in capability was decisive. The war didn't stretch into months because there was no realistic path for it to. The Anglo-Zanzibar War wasn't unique in structure. Many imperial disputes during this period resolved quickly once force was applied. In some regions, resistance became prolonged war. In others, authority shifted the moment military superiority became visible. Zanzibar stands out because of the clock. 9:02, bombardment begins. 9:40, resistance ends. That precision makes it memorable, but the real story isn't the speed, it's what the speed reveals. 38 minutes was enough to remove a ruler, enough to destroy a palace, and enough to reshape a government. It shows how industrial power and imperial agreements operated when challenged. The shortest war in recorded history sounds like trivia, but it reflects something much larger. That's history they never taught you. I'll see you in the next match.